Alright, this video is going to be a review of the movie Big Man Japan, which is Hitoshi Matsumoto's of the Japanese famous Downtown, a directorial debut, as well as a spoof of the giant monster genre, the kaiju or daikaiju genre, if you will. So, this movie is basically about one man named Dai Sato, and it's done in a kind of a documentary style, where it's a camera crew following him around to create a TV special based on his life and its happenings therein. Most of the movie is told from this perspective. The only one that's not is the monster fights, and I'll get to those in a little bit. So to start, like I said, Dai Sato is the last and only descendant of a long line of Big Man Japans, or Big Men Japan. I think it's Big Man Japans. Anyway, where they are warriors, or just regular people basically, where they zap them with 10,000 volts of electricity through their nipples, and they grow to enormous sizes and protect Japan from giant monsters. So, basically, you'd think this would be kind of a really action-packed film, but it's really not. It's more of a kind of subtle comedy, I would say. A lot of the movie focuses on how much of a loser Dai Sato is, how much his life sucks, and it reminds me a lot of The Incredibles and Hancock style of spoof superhero movies, where they still accomplish being a superhero movie while mocking conventions of the genre. In particular, they have a lot of sequences where Dai Sato is, of course, saving Japan. He's fighting giant monsters, though oftentimes he wins merely by luck, because he still retains his human traits of being a coward when he's a giant big man Japan. But a lot of other scenes have interviews with civilians saying, oh, you know, he causes property damage. They say, why don't you like him? Some say, he's fat. So, it's really got a kind of snide sense of humor to it. And like I said, Dai Sato's kind of a sad sack himself. He's not quite divorced, but his wife has left him, and his daughter doesn't really care a whole lot about him, though he loves her still. And he doesn't make a whole lot of money off a government salary. He can't take a vacation because he never knows when his job may call upon him, and may have to run off to the nearest plant to get zapped up with electricity and fight off a monster, which does happen throughout the film multiple times. So, a lot of the movie, like I said, is more subtle. It is almost a kind of a comedy drama, like a dramedy, not quite as, I guess, self-aware and smart as a lot of American ones are. And I don't mean smart as in intelligent, because this movie is a very intelligent movie, more so than the dramedies I am talking about. But a lot of dramedies, like Juno written, they don't really click, you know? I mean, they seem too well written, whereas this seems like actual people, so this is in fact better written. Anyway, to get along with it, the story does move at a very slow pace, so those that are looking for an action-packed movie, don't look here. This is definitely what one would consider a foreign movie in every regard, because it defies basically what American movie making is about, or at least what mainstream movie making, or American movie making, is about. This movie is very Japanese, ending on a particularly curious note that if you're not familiar with 50s Ultraman conventions, it will make absolutely no sense to you, and you'll think it'll be utter bullshit. Also, those that are going to watch the movie, stay through to the credits, because there is a scene running through the entirety of them that is equally hilarious. But, like I said, if you do enjoy that kind of thing, and if you are familiar with it, then this movie is a hoot. A lot of the movie, outside of the interviews, there is a good 5 or 6 battles with giant monsters, probably a couple more than that now that I'm thinking of it, and they are particularly inventive. The design, it is all CG, but it's fairly well done CG for a Japanese movie. Not state-of-the-art, but it doesn't distract you, and considering the cartoony and over-the-top style of the giant monster genre, the kaiju genre in general, it really fits the part, and it really manages to mimic the silly designs that they used to come up with. I'm looking at you, King Caesar. Anyway, there's one monster in particular. It has kind of like skinny ostrich legs, and it throws its eye as a whip and as a mace, and it's really cute. Like, oh, one is I don't even know how to describe it. It's just bizarre. It's like a giant wasted monster, and its arms are a giant elastic that spins, and has this long kind of giraffe-like neck with a Peabody head with a salaryman's face on it, and a comb-over that it constantly flips when it gets mussed up. Now, I'm told a lot of these faces are actually cameos from other members of Japanese Downtown comedy group, which I must admit I am not overly familiar with. But I will say, if this type of humor is followed through in that group, I may have to check them out if I can find the translations of anything, of course. But if they're popular enough, I'm sure I can. Anyway, the story does move at its same pace, but like I said, at a slow pace, but it moves along fairly well for this type of movie. The drama is fairly intriguing, and despite the ridiculous premise, you do actually care for the guy, because he is a likable character. He's not this over-the-top superhero, and he's more just like someone you say is down on his luck. And, outside of the climax being somewhat, preposterous in every respect, it does pay a lot of homage to said Daikaiju movies of the 50s and 60s, so in that regard, it does succeed, and it is really hilarious. But the story itself, while not entirely resolved, is well developed, and specifically there is a lot of parallels drawn between the golden age of the Big Man Japan era, and particularly his grandfather, or Daisato's grandfather, who's still alive in a nursing home, but remembers the good old days. There's a lot of newsreel-esque flashbacks to how things used to be, and how the Big Man Japan isn't respected today. And there is a lot of interesting mythology in the movie, which I did appreciate quite a bit, and it really helps add to the movies and your enjoyment of the movie. So I feel like I'm rambling on, so I really got to get going. Basically, the main actor is Hitoshi Matsumoto himself, and he does a really good job as Daisato. Very understated. Most of the time, he's quite good. Couple points, he's maybe a little too silly, but for the most part, he's very spot on. I really appreciate it. There's almost no other actors in this movie other than extras, but they did their job believably. They played it completely straight-faced, which makes this movie all the funnier. And like I said, the effects are quite good for a Japanese movie. You can tell there was a lot of money spent on this. This did debut at the Cannes Festival, so it is worth noting that to a foreign audience, this movie would be shown to a foreign audience. So it does still hold that appeal. It's not atrocious. I mean. And finally, the music in this. Well, there really isn't a whole lot of music at all. Frankly, I can only think of a couple pieces, and most of them occurring near the beginning and near the end. And all perfectly suited. Like I said, this is kind of a documentary-esque style to it, so it's very realistic. There's not a lot of scenes. I think maybe the monster scenes have music in retrospect. But outside of that, it's mostly just characters' conversation, which is fine, because it's a very low-end movie for the most part, except during said monster scenes if there are music, which is appropriate. Anyway, getting on to things, like I said, Big Man Japan's a fantastic movie. I would actually recommend it to people to watch, but if they are not at least even vaguely familiar with giant monster movie conventions, or Daikaiju or Kaiju movies, you're not going to get a whole lot out of this, and as much as you may like the concept, it's just not going to stick a lot with you. But other than that, there's not too much I have to complain about this movie. There were a couple bits, such as, a couple bits of comedy that didn't translate too well. I thought that the look at Daisato's childhood near the halfway point of the movie didn't really work out all that well and was just not funny. I can tell it was supposed to be funny, but I wasn't laughing. But for the most part, it's a great movie. I would recommend it. It's definitely a good collection of the giant monster genre. So, the DVD for this movie, I have to do really quickly now because I'm running out of time, but suffice to say, there are a shitload of deleted scenes, well over an hour and a half probably. Seriously, there's that many of them. Some of them a couple seconds, one of them 23 minutes long, a continuous shot. And so there's a lot more to explore if you like that kind of thing. Also on the disc is a commentary. It's about 50 minutes long, maybe a couple minutes longer than that, but under an hour, but around that time, that explains the background of this movie from starting the principal photography to the concept, all the way through to the premiere at Cannes Festival. So the commentary itself is not bad. The making of, sorry. It does revert to a lot of slideshows at times with text facts, but it is fairly in-depth and is helped quite a bit by, while there is not a commentary on the main movie itself, there is a commentary on the making of featurette, which, while not perfect, does give you more background information. So it's worth watching actually twice, so there is a lot more info here than it looks like. For a foreign release of a rather crazy movie that not a lot of audiences are going to enjoy, I thought this was a really fantastic effort, and I highly recommend you go out and see Big Man Japan.